In the heart of Tokyo, shadows hide more than just the night.
Once you notice the shadow, it will follow you until it gets what it wants.
And in the bustling streets of Seoul, a secret cult lurks in the darkness.
They lure people in with promises of eternal life, but once you're in, you become a prisoner.
Two cities, two tales of terror. Will you dare to uncover the truth?
You can't escape the shadow. The truth will prevail.
Prepare yourself for the horrors hidden in the heart of Asia.
I arrived in Tokyo on a rainy evening, the city's neon lights reflecting off the wet streets, creating a kaleidoscope of colors that danced before my eyes. As a tourist, I was eager to explore the bustling metropolis, its culture, and its hidden corners. Little did I know, my fascination with the city would soon lead me into the heart of a terrifying urban legend. I checked into a small hotel in Shibuya, the vibrant district known for its crossing and youthful energy. The staff were polite and efficient, and I couldn't help but notice the nervous glances they exchanged as they handed me my room key. Dismissing it as nothing more than a language barrier, I headed to my room. The next day, I wandered through the narrow streets of Shibuya, soaking in the sights and sounds. It was in a small, tucked-away cafe that I first heard about the stalker legend. A group of locals were whispering about a figure who followed people home, always staying just out of sight. They called him Eruitiru Kage, or the Walking Shadow. Curiosity piqued. I struck up a conversation with a man named Kenji, who seemed to know a lot about the legend. It's said that once you notice the shadow, it will follow you until it gets what it wants, he explained, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Some say it's a person, others believe it's something more sinister. That evening, as I walked back to my hotel, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The busy streets of Tokyo, usually comforting in their anonymity, now felt oppressive and claustrophobic. Every passerby seemed a potential threat, every shadow a lurking menace. Determined to learn more, I spent the next few days delving into the history of the urban legend. I visited local libraries, spoke with elderly residents, and even wandered through the less frequented parts of the city. Each story I heard only added to my growing sense of dread. One night, while perusing old newspapers in a dimly lit library, I came across a series of articles about unexplained disappearances. The victims all had one thing in common. They had reported being followed by a shadowy figure in the days leading up to their disappearance. The stalking intensified. I would catch glimpses of a figure in my peripheral vision, always disappearing when I turned to look. My sleep was plagued by nightmares, and I started avoiding certain streets and alleys. I confided in Kenji, who urged me to leave Tokyo before it was too late. But my curiosity had turned into an obsession. I needed to understand who or what was behind the shadow. I delved deeper into the stalker's backstory. Through conversations with locals and old newspaper clippings, I pieced together a chilling history. The stalker, once a normal man named Hiroshi, had been driven to madness after a personal tragedy. His wife had mysteriously disappeared, and many believed she had been one of the first victims of the shadow. One fateful evening, as I walked through a deserted park, the stalker finally revealed himself. It was a man, his face obscured by a hood. He moved with an unnatural grace, his footsteps eerily silent. "Why are you following me?" I demanded, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, familiar object, my own wallet. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just a random encounter. He had been watching me, learning about me, waiting for the perfect moment. The confrontation was swift and brutal. I fought with every ounce of strength I had, driven by a primal fear I had never known before. In the end, I managed to escape, but not without injury. As I stumbled back to my hotel, bleeding and shaken, I realized that the stalker had left me a parting gift, a note tucked inside my wallet. It read, "You can't escape the shadow." I left Tokyo the next morning. My dream vacation turned nightmare. The city that had once felt so alive now seemed haunted by invisible eyes. The experience left a permanent mark on me, a constant reminder of the unseen dangers that lurk in the shadows. Back home, I couldn't help but think about the legend of the walking shadow. Was it a mere myth, or was there something more to it? One thing was certain: I would never look at the world the same way again. Returning home should have brought me solace, but the memories of Tokyo clung to me like a persistent shadow. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, even thousands of miles away. My paranoia grew, turning everyday encounters into nerve-wracking experiences. At night, I would wake in a cold sweat, convinced that the walking shadow had followed me. My friends and family noticed the change in me, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them the full story. How could I explain that a part of Tokyo's darkness had seeped into my life? Desperate for answers and support, I found an online forum dedicated to urban legends and supernatural occurrences. It was there that I met others who had encountered the walking shadow. We formed a support group, sharing our stories and fears. One member, Aiko, stood out. She was a Tokyo native and had experienced the stalker firsthand. Her brother had disappeared under similar circumstances, and she had dedicated her life to uncovering the truth. Through our conversations, we pieced together a more detailed history of the stalker and his victims. Aiko's determination was contagious. Against my better judgment, I decided to return to Tokyo to help her investigate further. Together, we visited the places where the victims had last been seen, hoping to find a pattern or clue that would lead us to the stalker. Our investigation led us to an old, abandoned house on the outskirts of Tokyo. It was here that Hiroshi had lived with his wife before she vanished. The house was a relic of the past, filled with dust-covered memories and eerie silence. In the basement, we found a hidden room filled with photographs and personal items of the stalker's victims. Among them was a picture of me, taken during my first days in Tokyo. The realization that Hiroshi had been watching me from the very beginning sent a shiver down my spine. Aiko found a journal that belonged to Hiroshi. It detailed his descent into madness, his obsession with finding his wife, and his belief that the shadow was the key to her disappearance. The journal ended abruptly, suggesting that Hiroshi had become the very thing he feared. As we left the house, the air grew thick with tension. We knew the stalker was near. In the fading light of dusk, he appeared, his hood obscuring his face. But this time he spoke. "You can't escape the shadow," he said, his voice a chilling whisper. Aiko and I stood our ground, determined to end this nightmare. The confrontation was intense, a battle of wills as much as physical strength. In the struggle, the hood fell away, revealing a gaunt, haunted face. It was Hiroshi, but he seemed more shadow than man. With a final effort, we managed to overpower Hiroshi and restrain him. The police arrived, and Hiroshi was taken into custody. The shadow's hold on him was broken, but the damage it had caused was irreversible. Aiko and I returned to our lives, forever changed by our encounter with the walking shadow. The urban legend had become a reality, a reminder of the thin line between myth and truth. We stayed in touch, our bond forged in the crucible of fear and determination. Back home, I reflected on the events that had unfolded. The walking shadow was no longer just a story but a part of my history. The experience had left me scarred, but it had also taught me the importance of facing one's fears and seeking the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. As the days turned into weeks, The memories of Tokyo began to fade, but the lessons remained. I knew that somewhere, the shadow still lurked, waiting for its next victim. But I also knew that I had the strength to face it, thanks to the courage I had found within myself and the friends who had stood by me. I arrived in Seoul on a crisp autumn morning, the city's skyline rising majestically against a backdrop of clear blue skies. As a tourist, I was eager to immerse myself in the vibrant culture, the bustling markets, and the historic palaces. Little did I know, my journey would soon take a dark and terrifying turn. I checked into a quaint guest house in Insadong, an area known for its traditional tea houses and art galleries. The owner, Mrs. Park, was a kindly woman in her 60s who welcomed me warmly. As she handed me my room key, she casually mentioned an old urban legend about a secretive cult that once operated in the city. "They say the cult's followers are still around," she said, her eyes glinting with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "Be careful where you wander." My first few days in Seoul were a whirlwind of sightseeing and exploration. I visited Gyeongbokgung Palace, strolled along the Han River, and tasted the local delicacies at Gwangjang Market. Yet, the story of the cult lingered in my mind, a shadow over the vibrant cityscape. One evening, while exploring a less touristy neighborhood, I noticed a group of people gathered around a small, nondescript building. Their behavior was strange, almost robotic, and their eyes seemed devoid of emotion. Intrigued, I approached a local vendor named Jisoo, who ran a small food stall nearby. "Do you know anything about that group?" I asked, nodding towards the building. Jisoo's expression darkened. "They're from the old cult," he whispered. "People say they practice strange rituals and that those who get too close never return." Determined to learn more, I spent the next few days delving into the history of the cult. According to local lore, the group, known as the Seekers of Truth, was founded decades ago by a charismatic leader named Choi Sundae. They believed in achieving immortality through a mysterious process that involved not the supernatural, but something deeply rooted in obscure scientific experiments. I visited libraries, spoke with elderly residents, and even found a few survivors who had escaped the cult's clutches. Each story I heard only added to my growing sense of dread. One particularly harrowing account came from a man named Miho, who had lost his brother to the cult. "They lure people in with promises of eternal life," Miho explained, his voice trembling. "But once you're in, you become a prisoner. My brother, he was never the same after he joined. His eyes, they were empty." As I continued my investigation, I noticed that I was being followed. At first, it was subtle, a glimpse of the same face in different places, the feeling of eyes watching me from the shadows. But soon, the followers of the cult became bolder, confronting me in alleyways and outside my guest house. One night, I found a note slipped under my door. It read, "Stop digging or you will join us." The message was clear, but my curiosity had turned into an obsession. I needed to understand who these people were and what they were hiding. The situation reached a boiling point when I decided to confront the cult members directly. Armed with a small recording device and a determination to expose the truth, I returned to the nondescript building where I had first seen them. Under the cover of darkness, I slipped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside, I found a chilling scene. The cult members were gathered around a table, engaged in what appeared to be a scientific experiment. At the center was a man, restrained and seemingly lifeless, yet his eyes were open and vacant. The leader, a man with an air of cold authority, noticed my presence. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice calm but menacing. I demanded answers, my voice shaking with fear and anger. The leader smiled, a cold, cruel smile. "We seek immortality through science," he explained. "These are not rituals, but experiments. We have found a way to prolong life, but it requires sacrifices." The leader's words sent a chill down my spine. The cult wasn't dabbling in the supernatural. They were conducting horrific human experiments. The restrained man on the table was one of their volunteers, a victim of their twisted quest for eternal life. Realizing the danger I was in, I attempted to escape, but the cult members quickly surrounded me. Just as they were about to overpower me, the door burst open and Miho, along with a group of former cult members, rushed in. A fierce struggle ensued, and we managed to subdue the cult leader and his followers. The authorities arrived shortly after, and the cult's hideout was exposed. The truth about the Seekers of Truth sent shockwaves through the city. The cult members were arrested, and their victims were given the help they needed to recover. Back home, I reflected on the events in Seoul. The experience had left a permanent mark on me, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of any society. The Seekers of Truth had sought immortality, but in their pursuit, they had lost their humanity. I stayed in touch with Miho and the others who had helped bring the cult to justice. Our shared experience had forged a bond that would last a lifetime. And though the memories of that dark chapter would never fully fade, I knew that we had faced the truth and emerged stronger for it. Thank you for watching our stories. Did you enjoy it? What do you think could have happened next? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you want more stories based on real-life events, click on the video appearing on your screen now. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling tales. See you in the next video.